Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team. We're doing our Design Shop Talk today. See what questions you might have, get them answered, and let's see. And if you have questions while we're live, please type them in on the comments. Don't send them privately. I can't see those while we're live. If you see me looking off to the side, I've got a second monitor up, and that's what I'm looking at, trying to keep track of different questions as they're coming in. Have a few questions that we'll start off with, but yeah, feel free to join in. Good morning, Scott. All right, so question we got is, any idea when the Design Shop update will roll out? It's imminent. Beta's been in process for a while now. I know they've incorporated lots of cool stuff, lots of good stuff. So it's soon. I don't have an exact date for you, but I imagine it will be soon, within a few weeks at least, I would assume. But so yeah, it's coming. Let's see. What other questions did we have? All right. So I actually put these out of order. So the first question asked was the second one, and then vice versa. So about how do we set up for chenille, and then how do we sew on satin? So let's talk about the satin. Satin is kind of a thin, slippery material that if you're not careful when it pokes, you can actually cause runs and other things on it. So the smaller the needle you use, the better off you'll be. If you use a ballpoint needle, that's also quite helpful. When you're setting up to sew on satin, making sure you don't have really intense densities, that you're stabilizing it well. I'll tend to use a lightweight stabilizer, kind of like the Weblon no-show mesh, and then some spray adhesive just to kind of secure it, because the more things move around, the more issues you're going to have sewing it. So making sure it's nice and secure is helpful, right? So that's kind of where I would start at, is, using the smallest needle you can, making sure your densities aren't super tight, and using spray adhesive and a nice stabilizer, and kind of go from there. And my mic is super hot. I'm sorry. I just realized that. All right. So that's where I would start off with. Trying to think if there's any other tips for that. All right. So we have a question typed in on YouTube. It says, when doing patches, I always seem to have one that the border misses the twill in a little part. Is there a way to get the setting where it's not going to miss the twill? So a follow-up question for you. When you're sewing those, are you doing a whole bunch of patches, or are you doing them one at a time? So when you say you have one that the border misses, so I assume that means you're doing multiples, and a handful of them are sewing fine, but like one of the outer ones is missing. Is that the case? Let me know and we can talk about that. While I'm waiting for that, let's look at the next question. I was going to use an alphabet that was digitized to look like chenille. The only instructions I got was to use a big needle and some use a big thread, Burmalana, which is kind of like a yarn, and a big needle. What do I need to know? Actifeed seems hard to get it even to come off the roll. So Burmalana is kind of fun to work with. I think when I was talking to Nate at one point, he said when he was using it, he used to actually string it up and run it around the room through clips and other things. I know when I've done projects with it, I actually pull it off and set it away from the machine. And for using the Burmalana, that's just because it's a thick yarn, and you do have to up your Actifeed and things like that, because you need more thread. Now, with that said, the particular font that you were looking at, it's a puff design. So how you would physically set up your machine is you would set it up just like you would a normal puff design. So make sure the puff button is checked for each of your color changes. You would lay your puff down, and then you'd run the file. And that would come off as that faux chenille. So that's how that particular one was set up. Okay. And that's really all it is to it. Run it just like you would do a standard puff design. I think we have videos that we can link you to on how to set up your machine for puff. It's pretty straightforward. It's just making sure you have the puff setting selected in the software. Okay, so where it's not, yeah, 1 to 10. Okay, so this is back to the patch question. So it was, I'm having it miss the twill. So part of that is you'll hear when digitizing things, it's always good to finish as you go, right? And that's because embroidery is going to move around. So let's say you've got 10 patches on in a hoop, right? So if you're not putting the border on as you go, it's you do a design, things are going to shift. Dude, Rio, knock it off. I'm sorry, my dog was making all kinds of racket down there. That was weird. Sorry, that really threw me for a loop. All right, so let's go look at it. So embroidery is going to shift, right? So as it's shifting, you're going to have that border is going to move from where it thinks it should be, right? So one technique you use is rather than doing all the sewing and then all the borders is, do the sewing on a patch, do the border, do the sewing on a patch. You could probably get away for doing groups of them, but the further you spread them out, the more likely you're going to have that shifting, okay? So I would start off with that. Another thing you can, if you're going to run the same design over and over again, and it's always the one over in this corner or things like that, you can tweak the design to force the issue. I don't recommend doing that. I would suggest just doing it in groups. Typically, I'll run things close together and then just kind of keep shifting around in the hoop so that it's finishing as you go. Okay? Does that help at all? All right, what else do we have? What's a cost upgrade from version 10? You've called a couple of times and was told sales would call back, but no call back. Well, I'm sorry they haven't called you back. What I would suggest doing is if you can email applications@melco.com, we'll make sure it gets to the right people. Okay, so I would start there, is email us and we'll make sure it gets to the right people so you can get a call back and get that moving for you. So that's kind of where I would start off with, is if you send us a note, we'll get back. All right, so this one I couldn't remember if I did last week, and then we also had how to do an SVG, which was another question from last week that got sent to applications. So before we jump there, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So what backing would you use for a stretchy polo shirt? All right, so I assume you mean kind of like a dry fit. So it's a lighter weight, stretchy, things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what I would suggest there is I like to use either a cut performance backing or the Weblon no-show mesh. So basically some sort of cutaway. So particularly when you're dealing with stretchy things, using a cutaway is always a good idea. So start with that, is using some sort of cutaway. The no-show mesh or the cut performance are all good ones to use because they don't have any stretch to them and they're kind of lightweight, right? So use that. And then a good technique, particularly for things that are stretchy and move around, would be to make sure you're using like a 505 adhesive, spray adhesive. And basically how I have always done it, and I think we have some videos that we can link you to, that maybe Sue, it's been a while, but anyway, what I would suggest is, take the stabilizer, put some spray adhesive on it before you hoop it, stick it to your shirt, right? So stick it to the shirt. That way you can control, make sure there's no stretch on it, that it's, set up to be nice and stable for you, all right? And I tend to use 2 layers of the no-show mesh. Once you've got them stuck together, and we did get you a link there, get it hooped, and then you just run the design. So with the cut performance, it's similar to when working with stretchier materials, you also want to make sure you're not hammering it, right? So you don't have super dense, tight stitches, because that will increase its pulling and whatnot. Now, of course, you can do designs like that. It's just a matter of working with them. But that's what I would start with, is using a kind of a lightweight cutaway. The Weblon or the Cut Performance work both great. Okay. Let's see. Travis is asking about text to Alaska. Do I have any recommendations? I'll ask some of the folks I know. I don't currently, but I'll try to find out for you. Because I don't know all the texts out that way. I know them on the East Coast, but I'll see what I can find out for you. Another question on Facebook this time. I have an EMT16. I'm getting a lot of false thread breaks. Usually says bobbin break and mostly on run stitches. So on run stitches, so what that tells me is your active feed is too high, right? Because it's feeding more thread than necessary. So it thinks that there's a thread break when there's not one. So a few things to check is, one, your active feed settings being too high. You would want to decrease them. The other is to make sure all your bobbin tension isn't too loose, right? So if your bobbin tension is too loose, that can also play a role there. So whatever number you're at with your active feed, I would decrease it some. So that minimum preset that you would have, if you're running at 8, try maybe 6. Decrease it a little bit and see how that works. Another technique you can also do is to put a second layer of stabilizer under there to kind of thicken it all up. I know I've tend to keep tearaway or something like that handy that I can slide under the hoop, because that also helps. I was talking to another client this week about that. All right, so let's see. Any other ones that were typed in? Sorry, it got really active for a second. I want to make sure I didn't miss any. Okay. All right, so let's go look at these designs. And since I called my dog's name, he is now insisting on being obnoxious, so I apologize. All right, so let's go look at these. Webinars, Design Shop, come on. Okay, so this one was, how would you digitize this to be 2 inches or so small? So first step is, whenever you're working on digitizing a file, is you're going to select it and scale it down to the size you want to work at. All right, so currently this is at 26, definitely not 2 inches. So let's change it down to 2 inches and take a look at what we got. So start there, scale it down to the size you want. Now you can always go straight to convert and call it good, right? So that's one, quick way to work on it. It'll add splices, whatnot. You might want to review it. So that's one. Personally, how I would do this one is just looking at it. I would kind of start doing all this flower work and then end with a circle, right? Now I know, so this is just a single line center circle, right? And I'm going to change that down a little more narrow so it's a little more delicate. Yeah, let's do like that. Okay, so that's going to be the last stitch, the last step. Now, what do you do with all these? So I'm going to digitize a few of them, so just to give you an idea. But I want to start under this thing, under what's going to be covered up at the end, and kind of walk my way out and then work my way back and just keep on working through the design. I think of them as a puzzle. How do I want to get through this to have the fewest number of trims while still getting the design to look right? So these are pretty narrow. If I look at it, that's what, if I measure across, that's 3 points. So I don't want to use a satin stitch for that. I just want to use a walk. So I'm going to start here and kind of, oops, let's try that again. Let's start maybe here. There we go. So I'm going to do a walk stitch up, and let's make it a little smaller. There we go. And that's going to be under this. All right, so I've got a walk up, so that's one piece of thread. Now I want to do these 3 leaves. I'm going to do those as columns. We're going to do them a few different ways just so you can see. So I can do it as a backspace. So I've got a column for that one, another column for this guy here, Yeah. And let's do one more. So all I'm doing for the curves are right clicks. The straight triangle points are left clicks, right? All right, so I've got those, but notice I didn't pay any attention. Well, my starts and stops aren't ideal because now if I were to update my auto trims, you'll see I got a bunch of trims and I don't want to do that. It's all touching. I want it to connect. So I can always come and do the auto sequence, or what I'm just going to do is move my starts and stops around. So if I click on the element, notice the propeller is where my previous thing ended. So I'm just going to use the insert, stop, start, and change them to be down here. All right. So start, stop. This one, start, stop. Oops. Helps if I click on the start, stop, huh? There we go. All right, so update my auto trims. Got rid of all those. Now from here, I want this to be thicker, right? I want this to look a little bolder and not just as a single piece of thread. So on the way back, I'm just gonna copy this guy. So Control C, paste it, that way it's on top of it. But I'm gonna change it to a bean stitch. So that'll give me 3 stitches coming back. So now I've got 4. Alexa, stop. Good grief. I'm a mess today, I'm sorry. All right. So there's the bean stitch. Now we come down. Now from here, what's next? Well, I'm close to this little leaf, so why don't we either walk our way out? So if you want to avoid having to move your starts and stops around, that's cool. So I can walk out and then do another column. And I'm not tracing it very well, but I want it wider. There we go. Cool. So start, stop, it started near the propeller, ended down here. Now we're gonna walk our way down. And really, you just kind of work your way through the design until you get through it all. Actually, we're gonna go out to here. Why don't we do this one as a fill? A satin fill. So I'm gonna trace it like it's a fill using the complex fill tool. And then I have no hole, so I hit enter. I'm going to start it near there, end it down here, and make the stitch direction this way and there. I'm going to change that to satin because it's small, so I can have a satin stitch. Right, and now I can do, again, a bean stitch back. Okay, and literally that's what I would do, working my way through this design, and check my starts and stops. If I goof up like this, where I have a trim where I don't want one, then just change your starts and stops. So you can see my start is down here. So I need to change that. Start, stop, there you go. Update auto trims, they're gone. So we're down to here. And really just work your way through the design that way. That's how I would do this one. And once it's all said and done, I think I even, let's see. I did this right before, yeah. So I did this design right beforehand, just so I'd have it, or have a version of it to show y'all. And that's all I did for it, is worked my way through the design. And you can redraw it and see it, just kind of cruises through, no trims, because it's paying attention to how you're starting and stopping, with the final thing being that circle to cover up all those travel stitches. Okay, so there was a question here that if I was going to do this design on a hat, would you start at the bottom and go up? Yeah, but I mean, there's not a whole lot of stitching here, so I probably would start, if this were a hat, I would start down here and do these flowers and kind of work my way up. So rather than starting at the top, I'd start down here, which it wouldn't hurt for me to do even a left polo that way, right? So that way I can use it in both places. Okay, let's see. When digitizing things, sometimes there are 2 diamonds. What is that? All right, so I think what you're referring to is this guy. Maybe those guys right there, those diamonds. Right here, that is the width of this element. So you can see right here, it's for the single line center. This is a 20 point width. So if I drag these points around, that is now the width of the shape. Okay, you can see how it's changing based on how I move these. Okay, so that's what that is. That's dictating the width of the single line. Okay, Marcy asks, is there a place to get settings for each model of the machine? Yes, if you go to the manual for your machine. I usually go to the Advanced OS. From there, you can then look for the ActiFeed settings, and there's a table in there. So that's where I would go, is if you have an XTS or an XT or a Big Red or whatever. That table is different in each of the manuals. So I would just go to the Advanced OS and go from there. Okay. All right. Did I miss any other questions on here? Okay, so we also got you a link to ActiFeed settings, so hopefully that will help you. All right, I don't think I missed anything else. No, not yet. All right, so we talked about this guy. All right, another one was the S. So that was... Okay. Yeah, I think I covered this. Honestly, it's been a crazy week. So, yeah, I did. So I covered this last week. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. So the question was, how do we separate these letters? And how I always do it is I look at how it sews out, and this is set up to where it can be separated. And then go through to the, select the element, go to expanded point editing, and then I just go close to where I want to split it, and then kind of use my arrows under the stitch tab here until I see where I want to insert a trim. Then I can insert my trim, select this guy, and give it a new color. So it's really easy to do. It's just finding the stitch that you want to split it at. Okay. All right, so this guy, that was for Sophia. Hopefully that helps of how to work through that. But, you know, it's really about, for things that small, it's really about making sure your stitches aren't too small and too close together. So you have to pay attention to your stitch type, your stitch length, and how wide, if you're going to do satin stitches, how wide they are. Because you really don't want a whole bunch of, like that you saw I measured the one stem, 3 points. I can't really do a satin stitch at 3 points. I'd want it closer to, 11 or 12. So in that case, it'd be better suited for me to do a running stitch to keep it delicate. Okay. So those were the questions I had sent in ahead of time. So let me quick look through. Good morning, Lorena. See if I missed anything else. I'll wait a second, see if anyone else has any to add. Travis, I have a note to get back to you on that one. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So you always remember you can email us at applications@melco.com. You can type in on these. We do these on a weekly basis. So I'll have another one next week, see what trouble we can get into or what we can help you with. And yeah, Mr. Smooth on YouTube, thanks for joining. All right. I don't see any other questions, I don't believe. Nope. Well, something on Facebook. Let's go see, what is it? Any new stitch patterns that I've been working with. And then perfect settings for hats. All right, so stitch patterns that I've been working with. I'm trying to think. So I've been mildly obsessed with, and I think I've showed this before, I've been mildly obsessed with the auto split so this common auto split. I really like it a lot. It's the one that I showed you the settings for in the past. So it's the partition of 6, the 501, 501 on a 90. It does like a split down the middle and kind of gives it more of a satin look without having when the stitches are too long where you can't do satin. So I've been using that a lot recently. Stippling, I've done some of that. Trying to think what other ones. Oh, I've done random edge a lot recently. So if you look at the random edge under effects, random edge, I've been doing this for grass and other things. So using the random edge to kind of get a rough look. You can use it on furs and other things like that. So shooting stars, I did that to add some kind of tails and give some randomness to the back end of it. So using that random edge I've liked a lot. So I think those are the ones I've used recently. Let's see what else. We had perfect settings for hats. Hats are really on the digitizing to start with. Make sure it's bottom to top and center out. Why is that? You're sewing away from things that don't move, from anchor points. So I think I have a picture of a hat in here. Yeah. So, you know, the brim of a hat, it's rigid. It's not going to move. So if I'm sewing from the top down, if that fabric is pushing, what's going to happen? It's going to run into something that can't move, creating a bubble. All right. Same with that center seam right here. That seam, it's got buckram, it's got folds, it's got all kinds of stuff in there. Sometimes they put bias tape over it and it's not going anywhere. So if you're sewing towards it, what are you doing? You're pushing fabric, you're pushing stitches, you're going to create issues running to it. So that's why it's bottom up, center out. Okay, so from there, then it's making sure that you hoop it well. That we do have a link there for you to go look at some other videos and other details on that, but it's, you know, making sure you're hooping well. A tip I always like to tell people is to make sure your stabilizer if you're using the 270 cap frame, that your stabilizer goes all the way to those black posts on the back so that you can clip it, because when you clip the hat to the stabilizer to those black posts, that gives you that extra stability on there to hold everything nice and still. And then making sure your active feet is higher than you would for flats. So, you know, starting at, it really depends on what hat you're using, but your active feet has to be higher than you would have on a flat design. So, and your presser foot up some. So that's kind of where I would start with, is, you know, making sure your design's set up right, that you've hooped it well, that it's nice and secure, that you're using those clips on the 270 hat frame and everything's nice and tight, and kind of go for it, right? Let's see. It's easy to make any image with DesignShop. Yeah, with practice, right? So digitizing is really, however, you can turn anything into a design that you want. It's just what can you imagine? How do you want to create the stitches? How are you going to blend colors? You know, how are you going to add your style to it, right? So it's really, you know, that's kind of where the fun in I think the fun in digitizing comes in, is how we each interpret different images and turn them into some form of art, right? Let's see. Do I have any? You have issues with unstructured hats. Any tips? The thread always shrivels up. So I love unstructured hats. They run like flats for me. I'm trying to think, what do I do? It's the same things I just talked about. Is I make sure they're hooped well, that I'm using a nice stabilizer, and I then make sure the clips are secured down those bars on the 270 frame. Why? Unstructured hats, they don't have that buckram and other material in there to hold it nice and steady. So making sure you've got it nice and secure is important. I've even seen some people use spray adhesive. I haven't done that. I just clip it and call it good. Also, I tend to lower the presser foot because those hats are generally super thin. So having it a little bit lower than I would have normally. And then I'm trying to think what else. And I'll be honest, when I run the unstructured, I run them like they're flats. So I run my active feet like flats, and it just seems to go. So I think it really comes down to how you stabilize it. We have other questions. Let's see. Hats, images, unstructured. We talked about that. I love doing puff hats. I've been using a double layer of foam. I've using puff style. What should I do for a double layer of 2mm? Maybe a video on this would be awesome. I'll ask the guys about doing a video on it. I would just put it down and go. Make sure your presser foot is all the way up. I know Travis has a follow-on question to that is, do you have an article for adjusting the presser foot to go higher than it does? No, as a tech, I know how to do it, but let me ask if we can get a video for you. It's basically take the black cover off the left side and mess with things, but I'll have to get back to you. So I got 2 things for you, Travis, that I got to get back to you on. So, yeah, when you're doing a thicker puff, if you're using the 3 or 4mm, if you're going to stack 2 of the 2mm, making sure you have it set up for puff, which means your active feed's going to be higher when you're running across it. Your presser foot's all the way up, and yeah, just go for it. Let's see. Has anyone experienced an X motor error? I don't know. I'm sure someone has. Let's see. We talked about okay, so I don't see any others. I've been playing with the auto feed. Sometimes it leaves a lot of space. I'm not sure I understand that question. But yeah. Any other questions? I like it when we're chatty, so apologize as I'm reading through the comments. Anything else? When I pit? Oh, you've been getting results with when you use a lower active feed on what? On hats. Okay. Oh, when you put the active feed higher, it doesn't fill all the way. I think that's what you're saying. So the active feed is feeding thread, right? So it's making the amount of thread more, right? I'm not quite sure. When I go lower, it makes it look sharper. Yeah, it's just because it's pulling the thread tighter. So it's, some of it might be in the digitizing. I do know there's some folks like when you get a looser look to the stitches. Some like them tighter in the designs. If you're using a higher active feed, there's a balance. You don't want it so high that you're getting looping. That's not cool. And you also don't want it so tight that it's pulling down into it and possibly breaking threads. So there's a balance there, and it's what is your personal preference, what looks good to you. And it's going to vary. I mean, what I run might not be what person A likes or person B likes. So I don't find it to be super precise whether I run something at 6 or 7. It's all cool. If it runs, it's great. Okay. You're using Q digitizing? Cool. I hear good things. I do most of my own digitizing, so I don't tend to use a bunch of digitizers, but I send stuff out every now and then. All right, y'all. I don't see any other questions. I don't want to just stop the stream in case something else comes in, so I'll pitter around for a second, see if anyone else has questions. But remember, you can always email us at applications@melco.com. You can type them in on these type them out on these feeds, and we'll try to get questions. We do these weekly, so you get questions, write them down, ask them. I tend to post in the groups usually the day before the live, so that's kind of a heads up. Look for them when you see the little cover sheet thing, asking for questions. So we do have a question. What's a good material for patches? So I like a synthetic twill. So you can use a poly twill. You can find them, all kinds of places, whether you're using Stalls or Twill USA, or you can find the twills at even places like Joann's and things like that. But using a synthetic material is helpful because it allows you to use a burner if you want, or fire to kind of clean up the edges if you need to in the end. Rather, if you're using a natural material like cotton or something like that, it's not going to behave the same. So I would suggest a twill. Patches run really nicely on it. So yeah, and any synthetic. So if you just kind of look for a poly twill. Okay. And I think we do have a bunch of good videos about doing patches, so I'll see if we can get you those links too. Does Melco have a tutorial on digitizing for caps versus normal digitizing? I don't know if we have an actual. We talked about doing them, and I thought they were going to do them, but I don't know if it's been done. So we'll have to look. But you can use. I'm pretty sure there is a video out there on it. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'll have to go. We'll get you a link on that. All right. But I mean, hat digitizing is you can run a hat design on a left chest. So, you can always have them design it for a hat and then run it as a left chest. So Travis, when using FR thread with no excuse with bobbin, do we need to use the FR backer? Yeah, I mean, it depends on with the Nomex bobbins. So it depends on your customer. Generally, if you're doing fire gear and things like that, it all needs to be fire rated. So you have to use something that's fire retardant or something like that. So generally speaking, if you're going to the trouble of using Nomex and all that fire safe type things, typically, yes, it would need to be fire resistant backing as well. But I would say that probably depends on your customer, right? So do you have to use fire retardant backing when you're using the Nomex threads? No, it's not required for sewing it. It's really going to be dependent on what your customer what their requirements are. I would say, typically speaking, those customers tend to be quite specific, that nothing catch fire, right? So I assume their requirements would require it to be it. Do I have any sources for the backer? I haven't looked for it recently. All right, so now I have 3 things for you, Travis. I haven't looked for it recently, so I can't. I'll have to look. I think the last time I bought any was last year, so might even been before that. I'll have to look. Like I said, I haven't bought it probably in over a year now, personally. Okay, we did get you a link for digitizing techniques for caps, so we do have a link for that up there. Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to call it a day, I think. We'll do these. I'll do another one of these next week, see what we can help y'all with. I hope these are helpful. Wow, they all quit making it? That's awful. All right. I'll do some research and see if I have any luck. So, all right, everybody. I think I've got a crazy weekend. I have 2 children in a tournament, a soccer tournament, which means they each have 6, maybe 8 games. And then my 3rd child is also doing soccer games. So we have 8 to 10 games this weekend in soccer. So I'm going to turn red. Yep, I will be back next week. So yeah, I hope these are helpful. I enjoy doing them. Hope you guys like them. Let us know if you've got things you want to learn about. I know I've got a list of stuff I got to find for Travis. So I'll talk to you guys again next week. And you guys have a fabulous weekend. And enjoy the end of the school year. Woohoo! All right. Bye, everyone.